Hi guys, welcome again to another screencast. This week we're going to be discussing acquisition of skill, theories of arousal. So linking to our motivation discussion last week, these are the dominant theories of arousal. And when we talk about arousal, we have three main theories, and these theories are drive theory, the inverted U theory, and catastrophe theory. So if we start with drive theory then, generally speaking, this is the simplest theory to understand out of the three, and it suggests that an increase in arousal is proportional to an increase in the quality of performance. That means, as arousal increases, generally speaking, performance should increase. The quality of that performance is dependent on how well the skill is learned. So if you have a well-grooved skill, such as, let's say you're a really confident golfer and your putting's very good, as you get more and more aroused, in theory, that well-grooved skill should be performed pretty well. And as arousal increases, what we call a dominant response often occurs. So if we look at the diagram, and I'll come back to that dominant response in a moment, on the left you've got performance, low to high. On the right you've got arousal, low to high. And as you see, increased arousal gives you increased performance. Now, we're talking about dominant responses. It could be you've learned to throw a tennis ball all your life underarm, and you're very good at it. However, you might be practicing to throw it overarm. But suddenly you're put in a situation where your arousal levels are quite high, you're quite excited. It's a cricket cup final, for example. And what this diagram suggests is, if your arousal gets very high, the most dominant response will occur in terms of your skill level or skill performance or skill learning. So if arousal is pretty high and you've been learning to throw overarm, you want to throw overarm, but your arousal is really excitable, the dominant response will take over, and therefore you may end up going back to the underarm throwing because you're confident at that in an excitable situation. So the dominant response has taken over. Good sports or sporting examples to support drive theory are those with high physical capability. For example, American football. You need to psych yourself up or get yourself quite highly aroused in order to perform big physical gross muscle movements. Rugby's the same. If you were going in for tackles all the time, you need to psych yourself up for that, and usually performance is increased if you psych yourself up for that. Weightlifting is another one where high arousal levels might be required to improve that performance. The inverted U theory contrasts with the drive theory slightly. It suggests the same as drive theory in that if arousal increases, so does the quality of performance. So as arousal increases, our performance goes up, but only up to a point. Therefore, if arousal is low, your performance is low. So that's the same as drive theory. Low arousal, low performance. If arousal is at an optimal point, performance is at its best. So I'll explain that in a moment with a diagram. However, this theory suggests if you get over-aroused, it means poorer performance and also a limited capacity to learn. So if we have a look at the diagram, as you can see, on the left you've got performance going upwards, poor to good. On the right you've got arousal going from low to high. So low arousal equals poor performance. Well, we know that from drive theory. As I said in the middle there, if arousal's at an optimal point, so if I'm moderately aroused, I get maximum performance. So that's where the optimal performance is, just being in that middle, not too aroused but not too little aroused, I can get best performance. And this theory then suggests that if I get too aroused, it's going to revert back to poor performance, so making an inverted U. Sports to show good examples of this would be something like boxing. If you're under-aroused and go into this physical sport, you're likely to take quite a bit of a battering in terms of punches could be thrown at you, you're not really bothered, you could get hit quite easily, you can't concentrate on the important cues. If you're moderately aroused, it will suggest an optimum performance. You're paying attention, you're what we call in the zone, and you're psyched up enough to perform the physical actions. However, a good example is boxing, because you could think, right, I really hate this opponent, I really want to knock them out, I'm just going to go in all guns blazing and try and knock that opponent straight out. Now if you go in and do that, which is over arousal, the opponent might be a better boxer, dodge the oncoming punches and just pick you off because you're not paying attention to your defences by being over aroused. So boxing is a really good example to show the inverted U theory. The last theory is a little bit tricky, so you might need to go over this a few times, is catastrophe theory. This one suggests there is a relationship between what we call cognitive arousal, which is generally mental or psychological arousal, and somatic arousal, which is physical components of arousal like sweating, nervousness, etc. What this theory suggests is, like drive theory, if somatic arousal, so physical arousal, increases, performance will improve. Only if cognitive arousal, so what you're thinking, remains low. But if cognitive arousal, so your mental and psychological arousal, and somatic arousal, your physical arousal, both become high, the athlete will experience what we call catastrophe, or a crash effect, and their performance will reduce. So if you have a look at the diagram, again you've got performance on the left from low to high, you've got arousal on the bottom from low to high. As you can see, the curve goes up if you look at that A target. So if somatic arousal is increased, performance will increase if you follow that A. Now the point of where the diagram starts to dip down again is whereby if cognitive arousal has increased to the same point as A, then you get that crash effect and your performance will immediately drop. Alright, now a good example of this, or just to discuss this a little bit further, if, let's take Michelle Wee for example, famous golf player, if she's playing golf and every time she drives the ball she gets to the green on each hole, and for the first 9 holes when she's on the green she manages to putt into the hole with 1 putt. Okay, so hole 1 she drives onto the green, physically she's quite aroused, so somatic arousal is high because it's still quite an explosive sport, you need to drive the ball onto the green, and as she starts to putt each time, psychologically she's getting more and more confident. Okay, so we go to the second green, she drives on, she putts into the hole, first time again, psychologically her arousal is increased again. Third hole, same thing. Fourth hole, same thing. Each time the psychological arousal gets a little bit higher to match her somatic arousal until she reaches hole 9. And at hole 9 her somatic arousal is still high because she's still pumped physically about the game, but her cognitive arousal is now super high because she's so confident of getting onto the green and putting in 1 because it's happened every other hole before, that she suddenly experiences a crash. She misses a putt, and then hole 10 she misses the next putt, hole 11 she misses the next putt. She has what we call a catastrophe. She can't seem to putt correctly again. Golfing is a good example, and it happens again and again and again, where it's that management of psychological arousal with physical arousal. Now the only way to reverse that trend is to try and calm your psychological arousal down. So you could try things like self-talk, or take a 5-minute break, or try and calm yourself mentally to match the somatic arousal. Okay, as per usual, make good notes. We're going to discuss this further in terms of positives and negatives, advantages, disadvantages of each theory in the lesson, but go over this a few times before coming to the lesson.